enjoyed talking to you last year. An old Steelers fan, enjoyed certainly 1984 very much, and so was a fan of yours. Like I say, I don't know if you remember me asking. I did ask your producer, did you ever find that radio commercial with you, Pittsburgh National Bank and Terry Bradshaw?
No, I never found it, Marty. I mean, I remember, I don't even remember the radio clip. I remember we shot a video of it, but I remember the shoot, but I don't have a copy of it.
It was one of my favorite, like I said, trying to pay the bills with the Mark Malone football card. I thought that was pretty cute and all that. But yeah, hey, let's talk some football here coming up here, all right?
You got it, my
Here we go. Well, my next guest, I gotta admit, was one of my favorite players as a youth, growing up as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I always loved Mark Malone for his play in 1984, where 3 years after Howard Cosell and your quarterbacking, well, I don't know if it was your debut, but your first extended period playing time against Oakland, predicted you'd be a coming star, and you took the Steelers to the AFC Championship game, beat John Elway in the playoffs, handed the 49ers their only loss of their 18-1 1984 Super Bowl season. So he knows a little bit of something here. Actually, the next year was leading, I believe, the NFL in touchdown passes before a foot injury that derailed his career. But he has been an extraordinary broadcaster, and if you listen to Under Center with Mark Malone here on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities at 7 p.m., I think you get a fresh and also intellectual take on the world of sports. Thanks for joining me here. And yeah, it's AFC Championship week, and I gotta ask you, were you surprised by the Jacksonville Jaguars beating the Steelers this year? This last week?
Yeah, Marty, I think everybody was surprised, to be honest with you. And again, I didn't have a dog in the hunt. It's always nice to see the Rooney family do well. I've got an immense amount of respect for that family and the way they run the organization and my time spent there in the National Football League. But I don't have a rooting interest, but just from a statistical and an analytical standpoint, I was a bit surprised that more than anything else, although the Pittsburgh Steelers spotted them 14 points, that Jacksonville was able to hang 45 points on that defense. Listen, when you look at, we were talking about this on the show the other day, when you look at the quarterbacks remaining here in championship weekend, you've got Case Keenum, Blake Bortles, Nick Foles, and Tom Brady, which begs the question, do you actually need to have a franchise quarterback to win a Super Bowl these days? And I guess the answer to that is it's certainly helpful, but not necessary. I think Blake Bortles, I thought he played extremely well, much better than he did in Wild Card Weekend against the Buffalo Bills. They run the ball so much with Leonard Fournette, play such good defense, and play the field position game that it requires Blake Bortles to take care of the football and through play action, especially on early downs, first and second down, when people are going to overplay the run, be able to get the one-on-one matchups and hit the big chunk plays, and he was able to do that against Pittsburgh. I guess I'm a little bit surprised. Not at the defensive play. That defense might be the best in the league.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it'll create some issues for the New England Patriots. But in short, was I surprised? Yeah, I was a bit surprised that they hung 45 on that defense.
Well, I think that hanging 45 was my surprise. Again, like you, I liked the defense, and I thought that the Jaguars did match up fairly well. With Bortles, you mentioned the play-action passing and running the ball early. Certainly, he plays much better when his team is ahead than when he's trying to come back, and he doesn't have the running game to deal with. If you've seen the stats, Bortles with a lead, Bortles going behind. But I wanted to also ask you, Nick Foles, when he took over the Eagles from Carson Wentz, did not play well in his last two games of the season, but this is still the quarterback that in 2013 had 27 touchdown passes and just 2 interceptions. What are your thoughts on Nick Foles going forward here for the final 2 games potentially of the season?
Well, first of all, I think it's a bit of an uphill battle for the Eagles. I thought Doug Peterson did a marvelous job last weekend. He opened up, trying to take a couple of shots deep, and of course Foles throws an interception, and it just did not look particularly good. And I thought Doug Peterson did a terrific job of kind of pulling the reins back and micromanaging his quarterbacks. They went to a lot of RPOs, run pass options, that ended up being really good. They were high percentage passes, got the ball out quick. lot of that on first and second downs, check downs, didn't really allow Nick to put the ball in jeopardy down the football field, and they got themselves back in that football game and ultimately won it. Listen, Nick Foles had that one miraculous season, and I know Doug has gone back and looked at every single play of that season trying to implement something in that offense that would help Nick Foles, but this is I think it's going to be a game against Minnesota Vikings where the defense is going to have to win it. They're going to have to run the ball very, very well. And again, that's nothing against Nick. It's just when you look at the numbers over his entire career, despite that one season, that season in particular seems to be an anomaly more than anything else.
Well, Mark Malone of Under the Center with Mark Malone, which can be heard 7 p.m. here on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. The other quarterback, I mean, we all know about Tom Brady, and we expect him to play. I mean, it's said that his injured hand won't keep him out, I guess, is the latest I've heard there. But I really, and it wasn't just because of the Minneapolis Miracle, but Case Keenum, I mean, he put up tremendous statistics in college, but wasn't drafted. But now it seems like he's getting his just desserts and all this. Do you think that Keenum can be an elite quarterback in the NFL, or is he just an inch too short?
Well, I don't know that he's too short.
Okay.
It's funny. I mean, you know, we throw that term elite around quite a bit, and I don't know that there are a lot of elite quarterbacks. There are a lot of guys that I think can have successful careers in the National Football League and even compete for a Super Bowl championship if they're in the right situation with the right coaching staff, running the right system and the right personnel around them. And I think Case Keenum has found that. Pat Shermer, I think, has done a terrific job of, supplying him with a really solid running game. He's got a couple of big targets out there now in Stephon Diggs in particular. And Adam Thielen has had a miraculous season, in my opinion. I don't think anybody predicted him having those kinds of numbers and having an effect on the offense. But if you go back and you look at the statistics of Case Keenum, what you'll find is that the guy is as good out of the pocket as anybody in the league, and I mean anybody, from Russell Wilson right on down. So he's able to extend plays and make football plays down the field at a rate of about 58% completion out of the pocket, which I believe is the best in the league. And you know, he's got a little bit of Brett Favre in him. He's got a little gunslinger in him. And I think Pat and Mike Zimmer have done a really nice job of getting him to calm down a little bit and not put the ball at risk. One of the problems Case had, I think, earlier in his career, maybe he was trying to prove people wrong, was throwing the ball in tight windows and risking the football. And certainly in the postseason, you know, you only need one or two of those in a game, and you're going to find yourself on the bus heading home. So I like him out of the pocket. I like the way they minimize the interception rate out of him. And given the way they play defense right now in Minnesota, a solid running game with some playmakers outside. And we forget about Kyle Rudolph, who I think will be probably big in this game against the Philadelphia Eagles. I like the Vikings. I think they're 3.5-point favorites on the road, which is really unusual. And usually teams don't do particularly well outside. But I like the Vikings in this one, and I like the way Case Keenum is played this year.
And I know that a lot of people say, well, no team has played in their own stadium for the Super Bowl, and that is true. But do remember that, you know, Super Bowl 14, Steelers and Rams, that was in Pasadena, California. That was, you know, it's in Los Angeles. And also Super Bowl 19, 49ers and Dolphins, that was in Palo Alto. So certainly the Steelers and Dolphins had farther to travel than the Rams and 49ers did in those two games here. We're talking to Mark Malone. And Mark Malone is the host of Under Center with Mark Malone. He also was a pretty good quarterback for the Steelers, if I may say so, back in the 80s. Mike Mularkey just got canned this week as the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. I was hearing from a lot of people that were very surprised about that in the Tri-Cities. I know that in Nashville, long knives were out for him. But what were your thoughts there? And do you think that the Titans, I mean, I was surprised, especially a week after giving him vote of confidence. Mark, do you think that the timing of this firing might actually hurt the Titans as they try to hire a new coach?
Well, you know, you bring up a good point because they get into the race now of identifying that next coach later than other teams, obviously, number one. Number two, after getting a vote of confidence a week later being canned, I think this was more about the regression of Marcus Mariota, and just given my experience of having played in this league for a decade and having covered it for almost 30 years now, that my guess was you have staff meetings after that, after the loss of the Patriots, and I think probably what happened were the John Robinson, the general manager, ownership, the suits there, were concerned about the regression of one Marcus Mariota.
Yeah.
Asked Mike Mularkey basically to make some changes in his staff. Thought that would be helpful to Marcus Mariota, and I've known Mike for a long time, both as a player and a coach. And if there's one thing Mike is loyal, and he believed very strongly in his staff. And I think probably what happened here is that Mike said, "Listen, I'm the coach. I'll put together my staff. I think we're going in the right direction." And at that point in time, you have a diversion of the way you want to get to the ultimate goal, which is to win a championship. And I think at that point in time, they just figured it was probably better to part ways because Mike wasn't going to change his staff. So it puts the Titans, I think, in a little bit of a disadvantage. Again, they get into this thing a little bit late, and now you're talking about Marcus Mariota, with his third offense in 4 years. So it's going to be difficult for him and that football team, really, to kind of absorb whatever new system is going to be put in place by the new head coach and new coordinator, and expect them to click on all cylinders and put up big numbers. So I think it sets it back a little bit.
Do you think that Mularkey, because of that loyalty, is more likely to get a job as, say, an assistant coach in the NFL that you speak of?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the NFL, is kind of an old boys network. They take care of their own, and you see some of the same names floating around the league. Mike, I think, is a great football coach, and he's got very interesting and I think very solid concepts on the offensive side of the football. And assistant coach or an offensive coordinator, I think he'll get another job rather quickly, to be honest with you.
Well, the other question is, what are your thoughts on Mariota? He did throw more picks than touchdown passes this year, but Mark Malone of Under Center with Mark Malone, do you think that Mariota can be and I know you say you didn't like the term elite quarterback, but let's just say a big star quarterback, or is he destined to be scrappy quarterback?
Requisite things you're looking for in a franchise quarterback. I thought he was the best quarterback in that class, better than Jameis Winston. I thought he would ultimately end up with a better career. Mm-hmm. He's coming off of a broken fibula that he got late in the season last year, and I don't know that he was quite himself for most of the year. One of the other things is that Corey Davis, for instance, the young wide receiver, really wasn't the kind of playmaker they were hoping. I don't know that he's got the weapons. Decker is a nice guy with nice hands, and he's a big target, but he doesn't separate well anymore. They decided to run the football with either DeMarco Murray or the young kid out of Alabama. And I just look at it and go, okay, I think they've got it figured out. What they need to do now is find a way to get bigger chunk plays and get more efficiency out of Mariota. Now, whether or not that has something to do with the late season injury a year ago or the lack of big playmakers around him, I think those are things that the general manager, John Robinson, will probably address this offseason.
Right. And we had heard, you mentioned Mularkey being loyal and all that. I do want to mention that Joe Rexrod on this show, just 2 hours after it was announced that Mularkey wasn't going to be here, he actually did say, yeah, it's because he did not want to fire Terry Robisky. I remember actually your old coach, Chuck Noll, although you had gone, by that time you were with the San Diego Chargers, once almost left a few years early in his career because he didn't want to fire Tony Dungy. So Mularkey.
It's tough, Marky. I mean, listen, these guys, we get into these conversations and we talk about it every year about who has the power over the roster, who has the power over the draft, who has the power over their coaching staff. And generally speaking now, the patience level in the National Football League has become shorter and shorter and shorter. And these guys that are running it, either general managers or ownership, they look at a franchise quarterback, in this instance like Marcus Mariota, and go, hey, the guy's regressing. Let's find a different guy in here. Maybe he can get to Mariota and we get out of him what we expected out of him. And I think to a great extent you start stepping on the toes of head coaches. Now, I will say this. We talked about Mularkey's loyalty. I would imagine that probably 80% or more of the head coaches in the National Football League, given the choice of signing an extension and throwing a coach or two under the bus, would probably take that opportunity to do so. But Mike is just not that kind of a guy and felt strongly about Robisky.
It's one of the reasons I like Mike Mularkey, I got to say. I defended him on this show. Hey, before I ask you who's going to win the Super Bowl, a lot of people are talking about Drew Brees. I guess his contract is up. He's only about 1,500 yards away from being the all-time leading passer in career yards in the NFL. What do you think the future holds with Drew Brees? Do you think he comes back for another season or two to try to get one more ring for the Saints?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. I don't know that there is a more iconic figure in the history of the New Orleans Saints than Drew Brees. It always used to be Archie Manning, but Drew brought a Super Bowl there. He's 39 years old, but let's face it, he is in terrific shape. He takes really good care of himself. I haven't seen, his production fall off at all. I think he's got a good, probably 2 or 3 good years left in him. I don't know that the Saints could let him walk. Drew's already said he wants to come back. Now the question is, how do you work out a contract between the team himself and his agent Tom Condon that you can allow enough flexibility to keep players or go get players out there to compete for a Super Bowl. Certainly, as they're built, we saw it was a shock that they lost to Philadelphia, but I call them the most dangerous team in the NFC when the postseason began. I think they're maybe a player or two away, assuming that they don't suffer any unforeseen injuries next year. So I don't think there's any question that Drew Brees will be playing for the Saints for the next couple of years. They just got to figure out the numbers and make it work from a salary cap standpoint.
Great minds think alike. I thought the Saints, that they were very dangerous and were going to make the run that they did this year as well. Who's going to the Super Bowl, Mark Malone?
Well, listen, we were just talking about the 4 quarterbacks. I'd be hard pressed. Although I think Jacksonville's defense will give New England some problems, I'd be hard pressed to bet against one Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And then from the NFC standpoint, again, I don't care if it's the Eagles or the Minnesota Vikings. You look at the quarterback league, and I know defense is big, and they talk about defenses winning championships, but Tom Brady's had a hell of a year. I would suggest that it's going to be Tom Brady and the Patriots again. I know that that's a pretty easy pick, and I'm not walking out on a limb, but it would just be really hard for me to pick against him right now.
So Patriots, and you mentioned the Vikings. You like them out of the NFC? Did I get that right?
Yeah, I do. And I can see it going either way, but I think the Vikings are a little better team right now, to be honest with you. And I like the way Keenan's playing. That defense has played extremely well. Not that the Eagles' defense isn't good either, but I just think when you look at the big picture, that the Vikings are a little better football team, and I think they'll end up representing the NFC in the Super Bowl.
I remember when you were 30-odd minutes away from the Super Bowl, up 14-10. That was one of the happy memories of my youth, rooting for the Steelers, actually. He's Mark Malone, and still to this day, the very next game you played after that, 5 touchdown passes, 1 scored, accounting for 6 touchdowns. Still a Steelers record. Roethlisberger has thrown 6 touchdown passes in a game, but that's also accounting for the touchdown. So there you go. Roethlisberger and Malone, 6 touchdowns in a game. I remember it. I was happy. Thank you very much, and thank you for the time here. Mark Malone, we got Alex Doherty of On the Forecheck. Boy, the Predators won a real big game this week. We're going to talk about it after this on Tri-City Sports Now.